the collection preference 10 units higher than what you have requested. And it does that to avoid pulling red cells into the product. All right? Again, here's the target, the black line. Here's the concentration of cells at the collect port during 6 mils of inlet volume. Gone over your inlet pump. What do you expect to see then on the collection status screen for the collect port image? This is it right here. All 6 of these are normal. All right, this image looks a little different than what you see for MNC. All right, you will typically see this white border along either side of the collect port. And that is because the cells tend to flow through the middle of that collect port. All right, so the white border is normal. What do you want to see? 50 shades of gray. Constantly changing. All right? It should never be the same. The image is updated once every 6 seconds, so it changes frequently. There are some speaker's notes, important highlights on this page. At the bottom where it says, oh, first of all, please correct your workbooks. Bullet point number 3 on page 24. It says you will see the image appear in varying shades of gray, and it may have cross out the word swirling. It doesn't swirl. It has a streaming or a streaky appearance. Streaming or streaky. I like streaming because I think it looks like a stream. But I'm an outdoors girl and I like streams and lakes and oceans. All right? The last 2 bullet points say, if the shade of the image is light or white and the system is unable to establish the correct interface position, an alarm may occur. Interface took too long to establish. Julia's favorite. The entered hematocrit may be too high. In response to this alarm, it says you will usually have to decrease the hematocrit by 3 percentage points. This is the machine telling you that it has made as many changes to the plasma pump as is allowed, and it can't get the red cell layer up to the halfway mark. If you don't have the red cell layer at the halfway mark, your Buffy coat cannot be positioned at the collect port. That's the whole idea behind 50/50, whether it's Spectra or Optio. Okay? All right, so we've looked at 2 things that we have to monitor, the main run screen and the collection status screen. Those are 2 screens. Now we're going to be looking at 2 things. The first thing we're going to look at is the connector. The connector is where cell separation takes place in the channel. And you are looking to see that the interface is at the collect port, or 50/50, and that there are cells flowing through the collect port. And because they stream, again, it's difficult to judge the color coming up this line. And remember, AIM doesn't care about color anyway. It only sees black and white. That's the good news. You still have control. It still requires your eyeball and your brain to run this procedure. When you make a change to the collection preference, what happens? What pump flow rate is altered? The plasma pump there. All right. The last thing you are to monitor is the color in the collect line. As the collect line exits the centrifuge, you will notice on my slide that it shows a similar wand to your white blood cell cologram that had hematocrit percentages laid out on it. You will notice that the hematocrit percentages are gone. We had no way to validate them. They had to leave. So you now have a collection preference tool. That's what the new name is now, not a cologram, a CP tool. I attached it to the bump up here on the centrifuge chamber, and you'll have one of these on each machine if that's what you like. You'll need that then to compare color to. And you'll notice that the colors compare to 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7.5%. If you compared it, if you took your cologram and laid it up there alongside of that. All right? You will be deciding what color you need to match based on the product you're collecting for that particular patient that day. For CMNC, you can see it hangs around the salmon color range, or what we talked about as being salmon on spectrum. That may or may not be what you need for what you're collecting today. That is your call. What I have found amongst all of you operators that everyone has their own little sweet spot.
So that's how much percentage the CMNC?
So that would be 1, 2, that would be 3 there. 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7.5 for PMNs. Yeah. Alrighty. Questions there? We're not going to talk about completing the run because we'll do that machine side. We're going to run just through the troubleshooting and the optimization and be done. So I am flipping to page 49. The middle 2 sections we'll just do machine side. These are some of the topics that you have control over with respect to optimization. The first, of course, is collection preference. If you look up here at the PowerPoint, it may be a little easier to see what we're talking about just because it is in color. This just shows you what happens when you either collect light or dark with 2 different types of patients. Ones who have lots of cells and ones who have maybe not mobilized well at all. All right? So 1A and B are demonstrating a low collection preference. Let's just give it a number, 30, all right? Where we've got a high concentration of cells and not a lot of light passing through that collect port. That's all AIM is looking at, how much light is going through that port, and AIM is all about lighting, which is why it's really important to keep the covers on all the lights in the centrifuge chamber exquisitely clean, all right? Here is a patient who has a high MNC count collecting at a 30 collection preference. Well, look at how very few red cells are being drawn into the collect port. Why? Because they have a lot of MNCs. And we're collecting at a low number, which is a high concentration of cells. On the flip side of that, if you do this same thing, use a collection preference of 30 with a patient who has a low MNC count, what has to take up the remainder of the collect port in order for very little light to go through? Red cells. And you can collect with a low CP for either of these patient types if, in this case, you're not worried about how many red cells are in the product. Okay? Flip side of that, we're using a high collection preference. I'm just going to randomly assign 60 to that, all right? At a high collection preference and with a patient who has a high white MNC count, you can see that we're not getting a lot of MNCs, but neither are we getting a lot of red cells. Flip side of that is a high collection preference, meaning low concentration of cells, for that patient who doesn't have many cells. What are we going to have to pull in to get that collect port to have that collection preference of 60, let's say? We'll be drawing in or adding more red cells to the product. So either, I have customers that typically will look at doing either way, just depending on what the product is you're attempting to collect. It's all about your goal. Is your goal to get as many cells in the bag as possible, and then what do you want? Mostly MNCs, correct? With few red cells, few platelets. That's typically the goal. How you do it may be one of these 4 methods, depending on that goal. All right. In order to keep the collection preference optimal, this is not a plug and play. It still requires you to monitor the collect line, just like you did on Spectrum. And you're monitoring it here, just as it exits the centrifuge chamber. And you have the color or the collection preference tool to gauge or guide that line. Of course, if you're needing to collect higher concentration, you would decrease the collection preference. If you want a lower concentration of cells, you're going to move away from the red cell layer or increase the collection preference. The other way to optimize is purity versus yield. So I don't know if any of you ever met Andrea Jaworowski, the German gal that was our clinical support person. She always said something really interesting. She would say, Emily, with an MNC collection, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to either decide whether you want a pure product or you want a product that has a high yield. It's very difficult to get both of those concepts in the same bag. And she was right. If you're collecting and you want an extremely pure product, we are suggesting you start with that default collection preference, and you may end up with it actually being greater than 50. And these are just some examples of why you might want to do that. On the flip side of that, if you want yield, cells in a bag, you start with a collection preference less than or equal to 50. And these may be some of the examples of why you would want to collect